I'm a millennial psychologist reacting to the Gen Z stare.
Hi, how are you? Okay, I'll take hazelnut, cold foam, cold brew, please. What size? Pardon? What size? Oh, 24 ounce, please. Okay, thanks. I'll just wait down here for it.
All right, there are a lot of these videos, and there's all this debate about what the Gen Z stare actually is. Is it the customer service reaction that you saw here, or is it the blank stare in response to mandatory small talk like, hey, how's it going? And if you look at the comments section, there's like this generational war raging over what this means, and there's a lot going in there. But I want to dive into this because I think there's something really deeply important here about Gen Z and about every other generation's reaction to Gen Z. The common reactions here among like millennials and Gen X and older folks is Gen Z people are rude, they're entitled, they're lazy, they don't have any social skills. But what if the Gen Z stare is just revealing something important about the nervous system of Gen Z? And hear me out here. I think there's something important going on here. The common fear response is fight, flight, freeze, and then there's another one, tend and befriend. So, fight is when your body is transforming and preparing itself to fight off whatever danger you are feeling. Flight is when you're trying to get out of that danger. Freeze, which is often dismissed, is when you are not doing anything, when you're just kind of frozen, when you're not reacting. And it is super helpful in wildlife in wild areas to play dead. Predators will kind of ignore you, they'll pass by you, they don't want to eat dead food, they'll kind of move on. I had this reaction all the time when I lived in New York City and something wild was happening on this subway, and I didn't want to make things worse, so I just froze. I didn't do anything. Usually freezing's pretty important, pretty helpful, and it keeps situations from escalating into more conflict. There's also tend and befriend, where you work together with other people to overcome whatever fear you have. We're not going to go into detail into that. But freezing is a deeply, deeply strong survival mechanism. And I think this Gen Z stare, there's a lot of this freeze response going on in wild areas. When you encounter animals, freezing is about staying still, staying alive. In these kind of retail situations, the Gen Z stare, this freeze response, it's about staying neutral and reducing the chances of something really overwhelming happening if you're in the customer service role, or in the sense of just kind of getting by and opting out of this mandatory social interaction, or not knowing what to say and just wanting to get through to the next step. It's a very effective way of just making sure things don't get worse. Anyone who's been in the service industry gets it, and I wanna focus on these 2 pieces of the service industry side as well as the, like, opting out of this side. You know, when I worked in movie theaters, I worked in retail, I basically still work in the service industry. Mental health is a service industry. And the idea when I was growing up, when I worked in, the movie theater, when I worked in retail, the idea was the customer is always right. And I think that idea is pretty much gone now, because now customers are much more aggressive. They're much more unstable, and employers have less of the employees back. There's a lot of reasons for this. I think the resources of in-person stores are much less now because of things like Amazon, and so much resources being put into online sales. So I think a lot of stores and a lot of retail places, people work longer hours, there's smaller teams, they have less resources, less backing. And so because of that, customers are more pissed, and staff has less support. So none of that is good. And also if you work at like a coffee shop, you're inundated by online orders and in-person orders, and often those systems aren't well coordinated together, so it's kind of overwhelming and customers are pissed. They because everything is just like one tap away, customers expect stuff immediately and it just doesn't work that way. And so all of that it makes for a really bad customer service situation. And you add on top of that, Gen Z employees are far more underemployed than I was at their age. Like now, there are policies in place to keep most employees part time so they don't have to get full time benefits, even to the point of keeping their hours just 1 or 2 hours a week below 40 hours a week. So they never are classified as full time. So they're underemployed. As a result of that, they don't have health insurance. You factor onto that, the cost of living is so much higher. In a lot of areas, the rent is like 30% higher than when it was when I was Gen Z's age in these roles. So why should they be beaming with joy if you meet up with them in a coffee shop and you're like, "Hi, I would like a blah blah blah," and you are in responded with a Gen Z stare. Like, why should they be beaming with joy? And what and then on the other end, if you are coming in to a coffee shop and Gen Zers give you a stare when you're like, "Hey, welcome in," and they're just like, why would they opt in to this performative nicety when that hasn't been their lifetime experience at all, which we'll get into in just a moment. But I find this like these generational debates so frustrating because it's the same stuff. It's the same conflicts coming out over and over again. And all we seem to do is just crap on the generation below us and call them lazy and they don't work hard and all this stuff when we this has happened over and over and over again. People did this with millennials that we just, we were so narcissistic because of social media and we were so into ourselves. That was the criticism we got. And if you just go back to like boomers, everyone likes to hate on boomers now, right? I mean, boomers encountered this too. Boomers encountered this too. Every generation that's under systemic stress tries to opt out of that system that they find to be corrupt and full of injustice. Every generation finds some way to opt out of it. And in the 60s, boomers went through this. The whole idea of turn on, tune in, and drop out. It was this idea of look into yourself and grow, sometimes with drugs, sometimes through other means, but turn into yourself, tune into the things that are really important and drop out of this mainstream corporate ladder. Like refuse to go to Vietnam, refuse the look and ideals of the establishment, drop out of all of this. And the greatest generation, the parents of boomers who fought in World War II and invaded Normandy, they were completely baffled by all of this, by what boomers were doing. And they saw them as lazy and strange and like they were going anywhere. But it was just the way boomers were trying to opt out of a system that they thought was really messed up. It sounds a lot like what Gen Z is doing now. Like, why do we go through these stupid generational wars over and over again on TikTok about these things? I think it's so dumb. Um, I think it reveals important things, but I think the debates we often have about this are so stupid. You know, Gen Z is doing the bare minimum when they have to serve you or they're entering into these situations where my generation just had this like massive overly pleasing mentality of having all this small talk like, oh hi, oh hey, how's it going, blah 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 blah. They don't have that. Gen Z is doing the minimum, and they're doing the bare minimum because we gave them the bare minimum. We gave them a crappy economy. It's why so many of them live with their parents. Home ownership is a meme to them. They're never gonna have a mortgage. They're gonna just like pass memes about this stuff. Wages are flat. The climate seems doomed. They've had school shootings have been a normal thing for them. They've never seen a very functioning political system at our federal level of government. There hasn't been any great legislative victory for them. All they've seen is divided, polarized politics that's delivered nothing. And now there is AI on the horizon and is going to flatten their entire future. So, yeah, why would they do more than the bare minimum? My generation, millennials, we move fast and broke things. We didn't realize we are going to be breaking their brains and the planet. Whoops. Good luck with that, Gen Z. But there's a real truth here is that the brains of Gen Z work a little bit differently than mine do because they grew up on social media. They grew up with the collapsing of dopamine hits where you're not really working for anything, it's just kind of immediately there. And when your desire for something and the payoff of that thing, when it kind of collapses and immediately happens, everything feels empty and meaningless. So, are we surprised in any way that this sense of existential emptiness is like the primary emotion that so many Gen Zers are experiencing? They went through so much conflict during the years where during their teenage years where you solidify your social emotional skills when you start to play around with your identity. That's when COVID happened, and that's where so many of them, they were robbed of the normative experience that I had. Their brains are kind of wired for looking for likes, for looking for threats, for complete chaos. So when they've had less time in person with friends, less opportunities for learning from internships and work type of experience. And by the way, it's a lot harder for them to get these entry level jobs than it was for me because there's a lot less of them around. Are we surprised that they're kinda opting out and they're struggling more so with this? That their brains are so wired to see chaos and threats and, this complete meaninglessness in so much of everyday interactions and everyday social situations. They're so hyper connected, but also isolated and anxious, and so why are we surprised that they're so freeze prone? It just kind of makes sense for me. So why are they staring? They're not lazy, they're not entitled. They have these ancient brains that are trying to deal with this modern chaos. Their brains were developed in multiple periods of crises. And just like boomers during Vietnam, they're opting out of a system that doesn't make any sense to them. They're trying to deal with a system that feels rigged. So why smile for that system? Doing bare minimum is what makes sense. So instead of judging this, just be kind. That's all we really need to do is just be kind to one another and remember that they don't owe you anything. They don't owe you anything other than the cup of coffee they ordered or you ordered or they ordered, I guess.